The Belgorod Oblast, this is in Russian territory. Looks, I mean, it's a war zone, man. It's turned into a war zone. Ukrainian drone attacks combined with what the Ukrainians are calling the Free Russian Army, but is a combination of the Russian Volunteer Corps, the Liberty of Russia Legion, I think it's called, Liberty of Russian Legion or Liberty Russian Division, I forget exact their names. I know there's some Chechen fighters as well. I know some fighters of the International Legion are also taking part. They're crossing the border, firing mortars. I saw at least one ambush from a Russian Volunteer Corps soldier against a Russian army, as in Russian government army combat vehicle. I've seen multiple drone attacks on howitzers, on drone jamming equipment, on communications equipment, on Russian soldiers. I mean, it's combat. I don't know how extensive the combat is because they're not posting footage of everything for security reasons. Obviously, it's a pretty daring operation. And we also don't know, like, the numbers from the Russians are not publishing numbers, and the numbers that they are publishing are we've killed 500 of these guys, 600. It's just unbelievable. And the Russian Volunteer Corps, the Liberty Russian Legion, all the people taking part, they aren't really publishing any numbers. They're just posting select footage and talking about what areas they're fighting in, because they've crossed into multiple oblasts, including the Kursk Oblast and the Belgorod Oblast. And there was even talk of them capturing villages and administrative buildings for short periods of time. I don't know how long they're going to hold on to any of those villages, or they could have already been pushed out. We don't know. I think part of the reason they're being transported around in so many armored vehicles, while the Ukrainian government is playing sly and not saying, oh, I have no clue where they got those armored vehicles, is because they need to be able to quickly withdraw, because they don't want to be able to, they don't want to be stranded in a village, get quickly surrounded, be overrun, and then get captured. As members of the Russian Volunteer Corps or any Russian soldiers that have switched sides and are now fighting for the Ukrainians, they will not be treated well in Russian captivity. Not to say that Ukrainian POWs are treated well. UN reports say that torture in Russian captivity is systematic, with over 90% of people who go through Russian captivity being mistreated in some way, whether that be being beaten, sexually assaulted, raped, tortured, etc. Not properly fed. You get the idea. But anyway, Belgorod, these crossings keep happening, and this is what the area in the countryside looks like right now. It's some of the border villages.
Просто магазина нету лома, блядь. Ёбана в рот. Саня, ебаш. Ебать, все пиздец, домик отбился.
Dude, this is sad, man. This is sad. This is Russia, in a way, punching, thinking they would not get punched back. And it's sad for all the civilians. It's sad for the people who've probably lived in these villages, many of them completely outside of the arm of the Russian government, far away for 80, 90, 100 years, who knows how long their family lineage goes back in this area, and it's all getting torn up and destroyed due to the fighting. The sooner the Russians leave, the sooner all this fighting can stop. I know that the Russian Volunteer Corps, Liberty Russian Legion, all the units that have been talking about this operation have called for civilians in the area to evacuate because of this type of violence, because of this type of destruction. But the Russian army has not ordered a general evacuation from Belgorod, whether it be out in all of the countryside, any of the major cities. They haven't ordered any sort of evacuation as shells, drones, and other types of weapons continue to hit the countryside, and some into the city itself. Now, this has already been noted by Ukrainians for a while, but it's starting to cause a little bit of a hubbub in Russian Telegram channels. And when I say Russian Telegram channels, I'm talking about pro-Russia, that means pro-invasion, pro-fighting the Ukrainians, journalists in many instances, other times soldiers, local small-time commanders, talking about the war away from the mainstream Russian state TV media narratives of, oh, everything's glory, oh, everything's fantastic. In these areas, you can get some commentary that's more accurate. Now, still, it's all painted by the Russian perspective. You'll still get like bizarre numbers and stuff like that, but you can get a lot more unfiltered commentary, which can be useful. And so War Translated, the same source that we were watching that video, who had translated that video, and I appreciate all the translations. Thank you, Dimitri. He posted another video from a Russian volunteer. This is somebody who is volunteering to help the war effort, talking about how the government is not going to evacuate the residents in Belgorod, and that not only are they not going to evacuate, but they're not providing subsidies, shelter, refugee status, or food for those in the border areas that are being displaced. Let's read this. The federal government's amorphous reading. Now, they say federal government. To be clear, this would stop and end with Moscow. So the government in when I say federal government, they mean the government in Moscow. It's not like, and I also want to throw out there, I find it hard to believe that Putin doesn't know about these crossings at all. And so, I mean, where does the buck start? If you say, if we're going to watch Russian state TV, not even state TV, but state newspaper articles lead with the lines, Putin is Russia, well, then what is the federal government? Anyway, continuing. The federal government's amorphous reading, amorphousness regarding the threat to the lives of civilians. Very little is done in real time. The complaint is not against Gladkov. He is a real man and does more than he can. He agreed to evacuate at least the children. Why did the feds push the solution to all the problems onto one governor? There is no systematic evacuation, even from the border villages. So you see the village that we were just watching. There's no evacuation. There's no systematic evacuation from there. Stay there, leave there, who knows? Figure it out yourself. Yes, some temporary accommodation centers are open, but there are not enough spaces. There is no way to accommodate the elderly, the sick, or disabled, and in many, it is forbidden to bring animals, which for many are full-fledged members of the family. There is no interaction with other regions on mass relocation of people. Yes, there are private initiatives. The same Sobchak, sorry. No matter how I feel about her personally, I believe it's the name, it is actively involved in helping with resettlement, but there is nothing at the state level. Those who were able to move on their own are faced with the problem of placing their children in kindergartens and schools. No refugee status is provided for Belgorod residents. Although, what else can you call people who flee with one suitcase to another region while running away from shelling? In Belgorod itself, not to mention the settlements closer to the border, it is extremely difficult to work. People are employed in trade, services, catering, taxis, and others are in fact left without work. At the same time, by the way, this is what happened in a lot of areas in Donetsk after the Russians invaded in 2014, sent their troops in, and the fighting started. A lot of those areas, like, you lost so many people because there was just nowhere to work. And since there was nowhere to work, there was no way to pay bills, so they left. Like, Donetsk, like, bled so many people. At the same time, there are no tax holidays, no deferments in mortgages or loan payments. People not only have to work about their lives, but also to avoid penalties. Children were transferred to distance learning for safety reasons. Yes, this is not the most important moment right now, but it is obvious that it's impossible to study in such conditions, either in person or online. The children are scared. Many stutter. Inersis. Yeah, there we go. For bedwetting. Oh, got you. It's a medical term for bedwetting. They and their parents need psychological help, which is not available. I would like to ask the deputies from the Belgorod region, have your children started bedwetting? No? So why don't you help your governor? In fact, the border area is a humanitarian disaster. We need to help organize the evacuation of people. Meanwhile, as far as we know, and in Belgorod, there is no electricity. People are without communication, without water. Shops and pharmacies are closed. It is necessary to organize a systematic supply of at least essential goods. Here's the original post for anybody who wanted to read it in its original terms, since I am a Yankee. So, man, there's a few things I want to say about this. So the first thing I want to say about this is there's obviously a humanitarian interest in evacuating people more than just the children. We saw what those frontline villages are like. Even if you're not going to order a general evacuation of the entirety of the oblast or the major cities, which there would be an interest in doing that too, because drone attacks are still happening, other attacks are still happening. There might be a usefulness to that. At the very least, you would want to evacuate the border regions. At the very least, you would want to provide that type of accessibility on a mass scale. I mean, I've seen evacuations recently in Ukraine. I was filming a documentary with a friend, Dima, who is doing evacuations out of Avdiivka, which is getting closer and closer to the front line. And the main problem there is a lot of the people that stay behind, they have a problem where, A, they either don't have the money to leave. They feel that all of their property is there, and if they leave, they'll never be able to come back, and there's a fear around that. Some are waiters. There is a percentage of people who are waiting for the Russian army. Others are, to be completely honest, very, very hard-headed, and they take some pride in it. Like, oh, this is our old family home. We've lived here forever. My parents were buried here. One of my kids are buried here. One of my cousins are buried here. I'll be buried here. Nobody's going to make me leave. The main difficulty is convincing people to leave for their safety, and there's a bunch of different civilian evacuation efforts trying to do that. They try to do things like take letters or pictures or mostly videos with their cell phones of family members, and then evacuation workers will bring that to their family members in Avdiivka and another place on the front line and play it for them, like saying, mom, please come. They say they will provide housing to you. That's real. Or, hey, we will have you come to us and you can live with us. And this is the type of effort that's going on now, right? But this is because all of the people that would have already left, once they understand danger is being introduced to the situation, deadly danger, they've already left. 90 to 95% of the population in Avdiivka is gone. The last 5 to 4 to 3% that is left of people who are quite literally waiting for the Russian army. So that's that small percentage. That's still not the majority of them. Let me be clear, but that is a percentage. Or people who are too hard-headed to leave. They don't feel like they have anywhere to go. They don't feel like they have any family waiting for them. Or they just straight up feel like that all their stuff is in this village and they don't want to take it. They don't want to go. So there's a bunch of different reasons, but this is after the large-scale evacuation has taken place. They haven't even started the large-scale evacuation. People are evacuating of their own initiative because the danger is coming before the government is coming to tell them of the impending danger or to help them evacuate from the impending danger. So they haven't gotten past that first part of, okay, let's get everybody out that we can. Okay, now let's go talk to the people who are staying behind. Why are you staying behind? This is your house that's really important to you. You don't have enough money, don't have anywhere to stay. Let's find a place for you to stay. Let's find a place for you to be fine. But no, that hasn't started at all. And one has to ask why. Now, I want to throw out a proposal, an idea, because I don't know this for sure, but I have been thinking this. This was right around the Russian election. If Vladimir Putin, knowing to some degree that these incursions could be at least somewhat politically motivated, or motivated to happen around the election time, was to then announce a evacuation during the election, well, that could be a headline that takes away from the, unanimity of him being anointed for another term. It could take away from the grandeur and the beauty of the spectacle, of the election spectacle. And, in fact, not only would it take away from the occasion, it would kind of spell like a dark omen, wouldn't it? Oh, instead of talking about Putin winning, we're talking about Putin needing to evacuate Russian cities during a war that was just supposed to be not even a war, just a special military operation that's still ongoing. Might not be the best look. So I think that there might be a political element to it. I think there might also be an element of them, quite frankly, being stubborn about not wanting to evacuate. If they evacuate, they're admitting something. They're admitting that they can't protect their citizens. They're admitting that they can't stop the Ukrainians from doing cross-border raids, or these Russians, Chechens, International Legion soldiers from doing cross-border raids using Ukrainian territory to do so. And I think that there's also a strategic reason where if the Russians were to get enough troops across all of the areas where the Ukrainians could possibly do these cross-border excursions, that would be thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Russian soldiers. And those are soldiers that are needed in other places in the front. I mean, the Russians lost a lot of boys taking Avdiivka. The Russians lost a lot of boys fighting over Bakhmut. The Russians have lost a lot of boys, period. And when you lose boys, you got to replace boys. And so they need those troops on the front line. And so if they are diverting resources that could have been advocated to continue pushing around Avdiivka, to continue pushing down south on Robatny, to push on Lyman or push on now up in the Kharkiv area. They could be pushing or resupplying troops, but instead they're now doing border patrol for incursions that might never come. And so they might come to the conclusion, well, it's more useful there, so we're just going to keep some local National Guardsmen and some police to deal with the situation here. So there could be a strategic reason as to why they just maybe don't have enough soldiers to go around. And that could be part of the reasons why the Ukrainians are doing this, or having these Russian, free Russian, whatever you want to call them, guys doing this on their behalf as a diversionary tactic to get the Russians to pull troops out of Ukraine and have to concentrate on their own defense. Now, I don't know all of the motivations. I can guess, I can wonder, I can think about it all day, but what I do know is that the Russian government is failing to stop these cross-border incursions, that they are leading to a loss of personnel, they are leading to a loss of equipment, they are leading to Russians to flee the surrounding areas, and as of right now, the Russian government is not behaving as if there is all these people fleeing the surrounding areas and it is their job to support them. I don't know if that's because of the election. I don't know if that's just because they're stubborn. I don't know if it's just due to plain old incompetence, but the Russian government, as of right now, is not only having cross-border raids, but it feels like it's in a I've seen nothing, I heard nothing scenario with the general public over the situation.